While working with Gamble, we would often do landscapes under his tutelage. Sometimes he'd come out and see them, sometimes he wouldn't. But but what he'd always say when you brought him into him was, I can't critique these in terms of their color relations, or in terms of their drawing, or in terms of their and all sorts of things, right? But values. I can't do that, but I can indoors here, and what I'll do for you is critique your composition. So, A, who prefers to remain anonymous, has been sending me and working diligently on this shot of the Boston Gardens. It's motif number one. The swan boats. If anybody's been in Boston and you missed this, you've missed something really delightful. I think it's part of this grand, what do they call that? The emerald necklace that runs through a series of gardens that runs from Boston south. Has beautiful Daniel Chester French sculpture on it. Intermittently, just really a delightful walk. And I think it's still kept up pretty much all the way. Finally, I think it winds up possibly with that fantastic sculpture by Daniel Chester French of death coming for the sculptor, which was a memorial to the death of one of the young sculptors of that day, who had enormous potential. And anyway, but what a wonderful thing. Anyway, but here's the Boston Garden. Everybody likes to paint it. Everybody wants to buy it. It's a good souvenir type of subject. And this is a pretty good look at it. A pretty good review of what sort of happens there on a sunny day. But that's not my job. I'm not going to critique that. The problems A is having is the inability to resolve the composition, right? And that was all she brought it to me for anyway. So, but you can see that this composition has a lot of good stuff going on, and some awkward stuff, mostly right here going on, right? A little bit of sort of some stuff here, but mostly right in this area, right? One of the great questions in painting and composition is the composition. How to resolve a composition? Students ask so many times, if I go out landscape painting, how do I know what to remove, what to take away, what to move? Why and all those things. Don't get excited. Your first job is to make a likeness of what you see in front of you. It's also imperative that you learn how to compose and with the big thoughts about composition. But my job is just to critique A. So let's go to the first thought here. We'd been in contact before, and I was asking her what she thought the main lines of this composition were. And between us, it looked like it could easily be seen that, some lines like this one, you can't hardly get away from, right? It looked like. And some other lines, like there's a big placement from here to here, a big diagonal, and this is a diagonal going this way. So I began to wonder if this is actually, the main line of this picture is actually like a receding set of diagonal lines, which is very, very common. I've showed it to you before online, talking about Jerome. But the problem was that A could not get rid of this. I don't know if you'd say it was her precious. My job was to encourage the shift. This thing didn't seem to me to be any big problem. Just shift the angle of this thing so it corresponded with our big lines, or find another way to incorporate it as a series of those kinds of shapes down this way so we'd have a long line. You're going to have to play this over and over to understand what I'm saying, but I'm going to move right through, okay? However, because she didn't want to remove that, I said, well, let's look at that line. What is that line doing? And so I shot that line through here. This is actually my line marks over a photograph of her picture. So here's my line mark. I said, that's what that's doing. Is that repeated? So let's go back up to the top of this thing. And again, I'm showing you there's a secondary one there. Oh, it is repeated. Look at this. Potentially, right? Now, remember, here we are. There it is. Now, so what we're looking at here is a sort of a major mass here that is trucking up this way. If you talk about this and this, there's a movement toward this, and it seems to there seems to be rather a sag that goes through the entire painting. So that incorporates this really nicely. but it takes these out of the picture, or at least the use of them right here. And the clouds, which were built on that set of lines, are now going to have to shift. So back from there to there. So we kept shooting those lines, and they didn't seem to be problematical at all. I mean, you could see more of them. You can see, and when I say lines, by the way, you have to understand the idea of the point line. When Sargent says points and angles, he's not talking about long continuous lines. He's talking about point lines. This to this, say to something in here, to something here. Enough of those begins to add up to a long line, right? So if you see that, and you see enough of it, you'll begin to say, oh, I'm beginning to see that could possibly work. So and that was pretty encouraging for her because that's what she wanted to focus on. She really didn't want to lose that. She never said she didn't want to lose it, by the way. And sometimes that whole idea of losing your precious, which they talk about in writing, afflicts us as well. So look at it again. You can see that this is a very logical sweep. That defines, that's the biggest line in this picture, right? Now, biggest, longest, most continuous, most repeated, okay? And these guys here, these guys are also in this picture, and they have to be considered. How do they go? How do they go with this, right? Will they go along with it? Because there is that need, okay? So then we go down here, and you start throwing a couple of those in. The strongest one of these lines, the strongest one is this one. Because this is the center of interest, you're going to notice this one too. And here's this one over here, and look at them, what they're all doing. Look how empathetic they are. Isn't that interesting? So we went further, and we can see that we can easily build further on that line, right? You can see that there's enough point-angle relationships right through, like here and here, whatever you want. And now, by the way, when I say that, I'm not being casual. Don't be perfectionistic about this. To essentially do this, right? Now, a lot of these lines, if you wind up over here and don't have a point, then you need a point. Otherwise it just sort of gets sloppy in here. Then one of those little ducks, that little head shining with light right there, it's enough of a point, right? And that's the way you can adjust this bit of work. Now, but that leaves these guys, doesn't it, just totally out of the picture. Makes this one happy, makes this one sad, and, so what then, right? Oh, by the way, I didn't even notice this. Another one of these little points that actually goes right through and picks up. All right. So then what do we go to? Well, this is a review of that. And you'll see exactly the same tendency in the Jerome designs. And then here you are. I'm showing you what I then said, well, let's try with this, okay? So taking these lines, and we took the diagonals out of this. Or actually, we left the diagonals. We just rearranged them to correspond, all right? And if you can find that, you're there, right? And so this one now, when you locate this one, now these things are no longer long sweeping diagonals. They're going to be part of this bend here. They're going to do that, right? And you're going to have to play that through. And this is just a suggestion to Anonymous. But you'll see that these are placed. You can feel the placement. It's on a diagonal that rather goes to the ones that are already here. And if you didn't know this beforehand, you wouldn't understand that. You don't see those lines, obviously. And you don't want to do them in a way that's so obvious. That's one of the things about artifice, You want to be good at this self-evident logic in a picture. But you don't want it to be evident. I mean, the logic of it should be self-evident to you. And the picture should, its aesthetic depends on its being consistent within itself linearly, right? And this is just talking about the linear aspect of pictures. And so there it is. There's your thing. Now you can see that we could easily make further adjustments. These can be different sizes. These things could be placed differently. You could have more of them. You could have, but the idea is to get this one into sync with these other guys, okay? That's all we did, okay? Now I'm just going to compare them side by side. Now I've made these too strong, which is too bad, and I've made these too strong. But what happens is once you get this and this and this, and this becomes the single main mass here, this is the secondary, and this is the tertiary mass, the way I put it down, you have to actually organize them in time, so to speak. And I say from front to back is what I mean by time. So if you'd say, make this as the front one, this is the back one, this one here probably wants to be a lot weaker in value just to go back, right? And you'll have to do that. You'll have to get the distances right between here, this mass, and between this mass, so they're not monotonous. They don't want to be predictable. They don't want to be the same as the other one. They want to be different. So you want variety in your rhythms as you in your distances between things that are like each other. Okay. So anyway, so that's the idea, and all I can say to Miss A is that I look forward to seeing her brilliant composition. All these marks on here are mine. I made these up. By the way, one thing I did find, I didn't mention before. See this right here? I never liked that awkward line. And once I got this going, I don't, did I show you that before? Let's see. When I was working here, do you see how that line there trucks this down here? But this thing is already trying to go back up. You can see that, right? So that line was never quite feeling good. It never felt like it was beginning the ride back up as it looks like it should have. So I popped it up, right? And when I did, something very nice happened. And that is, it actually created a much better foil. It helped set off the center of interest by becoming bigger, not just this little funny line there. By becoming bigger, suddenly it set off this, right? And there you are. All right. Doesn't mean that further corrections can't be made, but it's just a taste of one critique. So good luck, A, and the rest of you with your hunt through composition. And oh, let's see. So thank you, Han. Uh-oh, I've got a list now and I've forgotten it. Oh, there are a number of really nice. Raj. I'll get to the other of you, Louise and Jerome, for your really nice donations. I think I'm missing somebody, but I wanted to thank you by name, and hope to see you next week, or next week in a couple of days. All right. Oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe and all those things. Okay, comment, share. I really am looking for comments and questions. Okay. Appreciate your expressions of appreciation, by the way, even the purely verbal ones, for sure. All right.